Morning everyone, and welcome to another week of maths learning. Before we go into our learning for today, can you have a look at the question on the video and see if you can answer the question? So it says, what number is each arrow pointing to? So this is based on last week's learning. You just need to read the ruler using it as a number line to work out which number the arrow is pointing to. So pause the video, have a go, and then we'll go through the answers. Okay, hopefully you managed to have a go at that. So we'll go through it now. This first one is on 1.5 because it's halfway between 1 and 2 on that big line. So that would be 1.5 centimetres. This one would be 7.1. It's just 1 after the 7. And this one is, you could count them up from 13, so it would be 13.9. The way I would have done it is, because I can see it's 14, I would have gone 1 backwards from 14, which is 13.9. But either one is fine. And if you forgot to put centimetres like I just did, then don't worry again too much. The main point of that was for you to be able to read it and write them as decimals rather than write the measurement. So we're going to carry on with decimals. Today we're looking at identifying hundredths of numbers and write decimals correctly. So last week we focused on tenths, and this week we're going to focus on hundredths. So we have pretty much the same style words, we just have hundredths now as well. So linking back to the learning at the beginning of last week when we looked at a lot of hundred squares to help with our learning, what fraction of the shape is shaded and how do you know? So focus on the first two questions first. So what fraction of the shape? So I'm going to tell you that all of these squares are 100. Okay, so that might help you. And then how could we use that then to write this as a fraction? So if we know that it's out of 100, there's 100 squares altogether, then our denominator is going to be 100. Then we would count how many are shaded to work out the numerator. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So therefore 7 100ths of the shape is shaded. Now how do we write that as a decimal? So as a decimal, 7 100ths is like that. Okay, because if you think about a place value grid where you have your tens and then your ones and then decimal point, and then that's when we have our tenths, which we looked at last week. Just draw a very nice neat number line. So you have tens, ones, tenths, and then hundredths. Okay, so 0.07, there'd be 0 ones, 0 tenths, and then 7 hundredths. Okay, so that would be it as a decimal. So now it's your turn. What fraction of this shape is shaded? How do you know? How would you write it as a fraction? And then how would you write it as a decimal? So have a go. If you're not sure and you want me to go through it, then stay with me and we'll go through it together. So we know that it's out of 100, so we know our denominator is going to be 100 as a fraction. And then we just count how many are shaded. So straight away I can see there's 1/10 shaded. So there's 10 there, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So 15 100ths are shaded. Now as a decimal, we would write 0, 1, 5, because as I just said then, there's 1/10, so we have 1 in our tenths column, and then there's 5 hundredths left over, so we have 5 in our hundredths column still. Okay, so it'll be 0.15 as a decimal and 15 hundredths as a fraction. So based on last week's learning then, we looked at questions like this where we had 4 tenths, that equals 0.4. So if based on this learning, what would this be as a decimal? If we have 26 hundredths, that would be 0. What? So if 4 tenths is 0.4, 26 hundredths would be 0.26. Okay, so remember 1 100, I'm not going to write it again because it's already up there. 1 100 equals 0.1. Okay, and if you go up, so if I did 2 hundredths, that would be 0.02. And if I did 3 hundredths, that would be 0.03. And so on. Okay, and then when you get to when you get to 10 100ths, that would be 0.1, and then you could put 0 there, but you don't really have to. because it's that. And then 11 hundredths would be 0.11, 11, okay? And it's that simple. So you're going to have a practice at writing these today. But before we go on to that, you can have a quick go now before you go into your activity. So on the video, can you have a look at these questions and see if you can work out what goes in the boxes, and then we'll go through it together. Okay, let's go through the answers then. So for this one, we have 73 hundredths, so that would be 0.73. This one, 18 hundredths, would be 0.18. And this one would be 38 hundredths equals 0.38. So that one actually you had to do the inverse, I guess. You had to go backwards, but hopefully that one was all right for you and didn't catch you out. Moving on then to our developed learning, we've got a question here where it says, James, Millie and David have shared 100 counters between them. Use the bar model to calculate what fraction each child has. Show this as a decimal. So you can see the bar model here. So there are 100 counters altogether. James has 32, Millie has 44 of them, and David has 24 of them. So James has how many out of 100? Now straight away, you can see he has 32. And how would we write that as a decimal? It would be 0.32 because there are 3 tenths and 2 hundredths. Millie has 44 hundredths, which would be 0.44. And David has 24, which is 0.24. Extra question, what would the answer be if you added all of these decimals up together? Hopefully you're thinking in your mind 1, because if you added all of these up, it would make one whole, because you'd have the whole, you'd have 100 hundredths then, which would be the same as a whole. So now it's your turn to have a go at one of these questions. It's very similar to the other one. I literally just changed the numbers and the names. So it says, Sue, Jenny and Darren have shared 100 counters between them. Use the bar model to calculate what fraction each child has. Show this as a decimal. So I want you to work out how many counters Sue, Jenny and Darren have as both a fraction and a decimal, and then we'll go through it together. If you're not too sure and you want to go through it with me, then stay with me and we'll go through it now. So Sue has how many counters out of 100? Straight away, I can see she has 41. And as a decimal, that would be 0, and there's 4 tenths, so we put 4 there, and 1 hundredth, so 1. So 41 hundredths is the same as 0.41. Jenny has 48 counters out of 100, and as a decimal, that would be 0.48. And then finally, Darren has 11 out of 100 counters, or 0.11. Okay, for those of you who had to go on your own, hopefully you managed to get the same. And again, if you add all of these up, you would get one whole because it's the same as 100 100ths. So now it's time for you to have a go. This is groups 1 learning for today. Now, if you are able to print it off, then great, you can do this part as well. But if you can't print it off, then don't worry, just don't complete this part. You don't need to shade in anything, just do the words, fractions and decimals for each one. Don't worry about this section. So that's group 1. That's the second part of group 1. Group 1 and 2. Group 2. And the last one for group 2. There is also a challenge on the end as well. And there's a challenge. Once you've had a go at some of them, then come back to me and we'll go through the answers together. Okay, answer time then. So the first section for group 1, 56 hundredths as a fraction is 56 over 100, and as a decimal that would be 0.56. As a fraction, 17 hundredths is that, and as a decimal it would be 0.17. So that would be 17, and then I'm going to type it because it'll take me too long to write it and it won't be very neat, so I'll do that now quickly. Hundredths. It's a tricky word to spell. And then the next one, we know it's 0.2. This one's a bit of a trickier one. It wouldn't actually be two hundreds, it would be 20 hundredths, because that's saying there are two tens. If it was 0.02, then it would be 2 hundredths, but it's 0.2, which means there are two tens, which is 20 hundredths. So then you'd write that as 20, and then I'm going to copy and paste this. 100, and I'm going to copy it again, ready for the next one. So then the final one, you had to count them yourself. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I think. Yeah, 7. So it's 7 hundredths, which is written like that, and it would be written as 0.07. If you wrote 0.7, then that is wrong, because that means 70 hundredths, okay? Because that is in the tenths column on a place value grid, okay? So hopefully that was all okay for you. The second part then for group 1 and for just group 1. 18 hundredths as a decimal would be 0.18. That would be 20 one hundredths, 0.22. And then you could have done your own one. So as long as they match up and you've got the right fraction for the right decimal, then that's fine. Maybe get a parent check it at home, because I can't go through all of them. It would take me far too long. So maybe check the last one with a parent at home. For group 1 and 2, 32 hundredths is 0.32. 0.27 is 27 one hundredths. 0.39 is 39 hundredths. 19 hundredths is 0.19. 0.46 is 46 hundredths. I don't know if you were expected to, I think you were expected to write that out for that one. So 46, oh, not 6 hundredths. This one would be 52. This one would be 59 hundredths. 93 hundredths. So 90 hundredths is 0.9. You could put a 0 if you want to as well. 0.03 is 3 hundredths. Okay, so hopefully that was all okay. For this one, this was very similar to the question we went through, hence why we went through it. So they shared the counters between them. So Mo has 23 one hundredths, which is 0.23. Isla has 45, which is 0.45. Let's read the question. Mo and Isla have counter between them. Use the bar model to calculate what fraction of the whole each child has recorded as decimal. Okay, and then we need to work out the exact. So to do that, you can do 100, take away 45. So taking away Isla's amount first. So 0 takes it, 5 can't do it. So you borrow 1 from that, put it over there, then that becomes a 9, and you take it over to there. So 10 take away 5 is 5, 9 take 4 is 5. So 55, then you've got to take away 23. 5 take away 3 is 2, 5 take away 2 is 3, 32. So therefore Zach has 32 hundredths, or 0.32. And then for this one, Louis writes the number of shaded squares as 0.5 of the hundredths grid. Do you agree or disagree with Louis? So he is actually incorrect, so you should have disagreed with him, because he's actually shown 0.05. Because there's only 500 shaded. 0.5 is the same as 50 hundredths, whereas 0.05 is 5 hundredths, which is what is clearly there. Okay, so he has mixed up his tenths and his hundreds, and he has written the 5 in the tenths when it should be in the hundredths. And that's basically how straightforward that question is. It's quite a tricky one to get your head around, the fact that you should write the tenths and the tenths and the hundreds and the hundreds, but we're going to do some more work on place value tomorrow, so hopefully that will help. And then finally, the challenge says Alex and Eva have been asked to write the decimal shaded on the 100 grid. Alex says the grid shows 0.70. Eva says the grid shows 0.7. Who do you agree with? Explain your answer. So first we need to check whether either of them are correct. So we'll count how many 10s are shaded, because we can see there's rows of 10s at a time. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we know that 7 lots of 10 are shaded, which is 70. So we know that 7 hundredths as a fraction is shaded. So as a decimal, you can write it, in fact, as this and this. So the 0 here, a 0 in the hundredths doesn't act as a placeholder like it does if it's in a whole number. So we don't actually need the 0 there. You can write it, but you don't need it there. These are the same thing. The 0 isn't a placeholder like it is when it's before the decimal point. So they are both correct, but Alex didn't need to have the 0 there. Okay, hopefully that was all okay for you, and it was quite straightforward. We'll be going through some more of this tomorrow, so don't worry too much if it was a bit tricky, because we'll do some more tomorrow. Thank you for watching, and I'll speak to you all soon.